I'm really honored to introduce Catherine Ellison. Catherine, would you please come up? I mentioned earlier in the conference that Catherine Ellison is the author of several books on youth mental health, and in particular, co-author from one of our other speakers, Dr. Stephen Hinshaw, who we saw earlier. So Catherine is going to moderate a panel of parents. Will our parent panel please come up? I've seen you in the audience. We can come up and get the parent panel ready. We're going to hear the perspective of parents and in the youth mental health struggles, finding solutions, and Catherine Ellison will moderate this panel. So I'm turning it over to you.
Thank you. Thank you. What a hard act to follow. I'm still kind of verklempt. Well, it's wonderful to be with you all today, and thank you for that introduction. And I really would love to know how many people out there are parents. Oh, great! Wow. Yeah, so I was wondering about that all day today because obviously the youth are our focus, but parents, as Dr. Insel mentioned earlier in the day, are really struggling. Our houses are often on fire, and we need a lot more help than we're getting. So many of us just love our children so passionately, would do anything to try to help them. And yet so many of us have to reinvent the wheel each time, figure out what we're dealing with, how to get help, how to cope with insurance. So my hope for this panel is that we're really trying to give you the most pragmatic, hands-on advice from people who've walked down that road, and that you can walk away and have news you can use. I knew my troubles began when my son was just 9, and there was a time when he swore at me, so I took away his Game Boy, and he actually called 911. The police came to our house, put my husband and me in different rooms, questioned us, and I really thought maybe they would take our son away. Until I heard one of the police officers saying, "She took away your what?" So my son was diagnosed with ADHD, and just by the way, it is ADHD. It was changed formally from ADD in 1987. So just for any of you who have kids with it, that's the name. Anyway, he was diagnosed, and like many parents, I had to figure out just how we could help him, and also how we could help our family, because I think one thing that was not talked about today is, especially with males, how often depression, anxiety, learning disorders can turn into aggression, irritability, and conflict at home, which makes daily life in your family kind of a nightmare and puts you in a crisis where your house really is on fire and you need a lot of help. So I was really lucky, though, because being a journalist and an author, I managed to get a book contract in 2008 that allowed me to spend a year of my life dedicating myself to, as if it were my job, figuring out what is ADHD, what's going on there, how can we help each other, and what can I really learn about this very confusing disorder, and along the way with the comorbidities of anxiety and depression that so often accompany it. Well, I was trying all week to figure out what are the most useful things I can tell you very briefly that I learned. And there are 5. Okay, so one is you really have to be calm. And that is so much easier, or harder than it sounds. For parents, so many of us are struggling with our own issues, our own traumas and problems, and we have to work them out to be of service to our children, to best help our children. I don't know how many of you have heard about the book, The Body Keeps the Score. It's now back on the bestseller list, and one of the things that's just so amazing about this author is that he shows how prevalent trauma is in our society, how many of us adults grew up with violence or sexual abuse or alcoholic parents or some other kind of tragedy that we're still recovering from and maybe don't even know it. For me, I found out that I also was eligible for a diagnosis of ADHD, and that helped me so much in figuring out how to best help my son, because I realized how much I was unwittingly contributing to the conflict in our family. So in figuring out your own constellation of issues, you can also figure out how to self-soothe yourself and find that stress relief and take care of yourself in the way that you need to be fully present for your child. So that's number one. I guess number two is there's no silver bullet. And even though I think that was pretty well expressed during this long series of talks today, but just a reminder, there's no one pill or therapy or book that's going to get you out of a crisis with your child. And you have to learn to really be patient, because you can find yourself up at night doom scrolling and reading especially the .com content on the web where people are trying to sell you something. And there's so many predatory companies out there that are trying to take advantage of your fear and desperation and sell you something as a miracle cure. So we have to keep in mind that this is a process. It probably takes a long time to find the best help for our children, and be patient with that. That's part of staying calm. And really to take care, I guess that's point number 3, where you do look for help. It was interesting today. I think one of the things we're going to talk about is, how do you find a therapist? Like, how do you find the person who's best suited for whatever your child is dealing with? And somebody you can afford, and somebody who's qualified. And I think a really important point is that ask your pediatrician. Start with your pediatrician, especially if you like that doctor, because pediatricians are right in the thick of things. They often know who's in the community, and they can help you a lot through this sometimes bewildering maze. Also, make sure that when you're researching, ignore those .com contents and look for the .edu, .gov, .org, because those are much more, trustworthy. Okay, so quickly, fourth is when your child is behaving most horribly, and I had to learn this again and again, that's when they most need you. When they're most pushing you away, that's when you have to be the strongest and most present. And I'll tell you an encouraging story about my son. He refused to go to school for a while, like a lot of kids do and did, when they're feeling anxiety and depression. And my heart was breaking for him, because I knew what he was going through, but I also knew that he had to go to school. And for all the reasons that we were hearing earlier about mastery and kind of exposure, it was important for him to go, and with support. So at one point I actually even had the police take him to school, because we were in such conflict, and that's pretty controversial, and I'm happy to take questions on it. But I will tell you that he's now almost 28, and the other day we were talking on the phone, and I said, I've been thinking about how I called the cops to take you to school, and what did you think about that? And he said, well, you were overreacting, but at least you were paying attention. So to me, that's a bottom line lesson that, don't disengage. When they're the most difficult, that's when they need you the most. And number 5, which I think is apparent to everybody who's come here today, is to get educated. Learn whatever you can, figure out be open to new information, but I don't have to tell you that, because you already are. Now, I would like everybody to just introduce themselves briefly, and then we will talk, we'll go into questions of the panel, and then hopefully have time for you guys to ask.
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Dr. Janie Smith. I am the founding CEO of Mental Health Connect, and we build, our whole mission is around building allies in the mental health movement. And I'll talk more about that later, but I'm also, more importantly, a mother to a 5-year-old, and I've got 2 spirit babies that are in heaven as of last March. So that is me. I've got a husband and a dog named Olive.
Hi, I'm Jeff, and I'm the executive director of a nonprofit called Teens for Teens Help, which we developed with our daughter after going through a 4 or 5 year journey of anorexia and all the treatment centers and hospitals and things involved. And this is my wife, Kathy.
Hi, Kathy, the wife. I don't have a title at Teens for Teens Help. I'm just behind the scenes. I have the same daughter. We also have a son and a dog, Ace. I practice acupuncture and functional medicine in my spare time, and I'm just really happy to be here today.
Yes, my name is Martin Alonso. I'm a father of 4. Angel, 26, Alex, 24, Alice, 21, and Andrea, 17. I also are involved with youth ministry in my parish in Salinas.
Thank you all very much. And Janie, just starting with you, your child was 5 years old when she experienced some anxiety. Can you tell us what led you to believe that you needed to get her help?
Yeah, so I miscarried last year, right before her birthday, and her 4th birthday, and she just was really, seemed to be okay for several months. And then all of a sudden, probably July, August-ish, one night, she broke down and shared that she thought that I had died when I went in to the hospital for the miscarriage. And from there, her anxiety around death, her obsession, I mean, everything. She was afraid she would touch a hot star and it would, burn her up, or she would eat an ant trap, or, it was just, and then it escalated to she didn't want to touch a helium, balloon because maybe the helium would go through it and she'd breathe it in and die. And so for me as a mental health professional and as a parent watching her, majority of days for 2 weeks or more, if your child is experiencing a sign or symptom, additional intervention is needed. And so I knew that, and so this had been going on for a period of about 3 weeks. I started trying to find some support, but then she stopped wanting to go to school because there was an ant trap situation at school. And at that point I knew, okay, this is interfering with her daily life, and I can't help her. We have to get support. So that's how I knew.
And what was your first step in getting support? How did you find her effective therapy?
Well, I went to her, I called her pediatrician first and asked if there had been, because mind you, also she's, half her life has been with COVID, so she's also experienced a lot of, deaths and grief and sickness and fear, and as a parent, we can't protect littles from that, So anyway, I went to her pediatrician, and he said he wasn't really seeing anything like that. And he said, well, has there been any major loss in the family? And I said, not really. And then I went, oh, but I miscarried. And he goes, that would do it. So I realized that then at that point I needed to reach out. And I just honestly used all of my professional network to get someone to finally say yes. And everybody's full, as you all know, but this incredible therapist agreed to see us for 6 sessions. So
Just 6.
that's all she had time in her schedule.
That solved the problem.
And but I did, we worked hand in hand, and which I'll get into. You want me to talk about that now?
Well, yeah, I do.
Yeah.
What
Okay.
kind of therapist was it?
So she's a LMFT and specializes in working with children in grief and trauma. She's local here in Carmel. And so she did a lot of sand tray therapy. We did a lot of book reading. We did some exposure therapy, some of the bilateral tapping, which is the based in EMDR, and helped us as a family learn how to grieve Claire not being a big sister, in the way that she had imagined that she would be. And then, us as a family learning how to help trick the tricky worries, So her tricky worries about, I'm going to touch a hot star and die, or I'm going to, inhale exhaust from the next door neighbor's compression machine and die, or I'm, just this everything was starting to become this potential cause of death for her. And so tricking the tricky worries. And then we worked really closely with her preschool teachers, making sure that we were all, and my family, my extended family, that we all had the same language and support from the therapist, so that when she was with all of us, it was consistent. And the six sessions made a big difference. And now she'll when she was little, like her and my husband would go on ant hunts in the house, to kill, to get the ants.
Gosh. Yeah.
So she was never afraid of bugs before this. Anyway, but now she's back to 2 days ago. She's like, guess what? I just killed an ant all by myself. I was like, good job, girl.
Was affordability an issue? Was paying for the therapy?
You know, fortunately for me, no, because my husband and I both work, and we have family support financially. So for us, it was not a barrier this time, but it has for me in the past when I've been doing my own work. Yeah.
So you didn't have to use insurance, or did you have?
We didn't use insurance.
Yeah.
No.
That's
And
a-
you can
yeah.
reimburse. You know, we could have reimbursed with a super bill, but
Yeah.
we didn't.
Well, that is a lucky situation.
Yes,
Yeah.
very fortunate.
So I'm really glad that it worked out well.
Yes, thank you.
And Jeff, I have a question for you and Kathy about earlier today. We were talking about kids that don't want their parents' help, but it looks like you really managed to help your daughter. So I'm wondering, like you've mentioned before about how she was dressing in black and kind of backing away. How did you reach her? How did you get through to her?
Well, I don't think we did initially. I mean, she was a very bright, active child, but when she got into middle school, she was wearing all black and answering in one-word sentences. And, I would say, "How are you?" And she'd say, "Fine." And we just decoded that as F-I-N-E, fuck, I'm not explaining. And so she wouldn't talk to us. And, I called my dad, who's a psychologist, and I told him what was going on. And he said, "Well, how are her grades?" And I said, "Straight A's." He said, "It's a phase. Don't worry about it."
Yeah.
But he knew nothing about the disease anorexia, and neither did we. And I'm going to let Kathy go here.
Well, maybe Kathy, you could tell us, how did you actually, okay, so she was resisting, you weren't getting help from his dad. How did you break through to actually get her the help she needed?
Well, it was forced upon us. We just knew she had to go into therapy. Her depression was getting just really bad and obvious. And so as soon as she went into therapy, that's actually when the eating disorder kicked into high gear, and she just stopped eating. And so we whisk her off to the doctor's office. And the next day, we get a phone call that she has to go see a cardiologist because her heart rate is so low, and we have to find a residential treatment now.
Wow.
So it wasn't, we
No.
didn't figure it out. We were instructed on exactly what to do. And that was terrifying, quite frankly. And I didn't know how to look up a residential program for eating
How
disorders.
did you do it?
You just start Googling, and I went to Psychology Today because I figured that
Wait,
was
you
a
had to
reputable.
Google, a doctor was telling you had to go to a residential program, but you had to Google one for yourself? There was no recommendation which one?
No, not specifically for the eating disorders. She helped us when we had to get into the psych ward later, down the road. But for the eating disorders, we were kind of on our own and left to just make phone calls and ask about insurance, because we did have to use insurance. I just remember at one point someone said, "Well, we deal with disordered eating, not eating disorders." And I thought my head was going to explode.
insane,
I'm like,
yeah.
I'm so out of my league right now.
Yeah.
So
I
we
just
learned
want
a
to
lot.
mention that Kathy and Jeff wrote a book about anorexia. So they were among those parents who had to reinvent the wheel for other people too. Yeah. So did insurance pay for the residential treatment, or how did you manage to?
Insurance, and this was actually a question I wanted to ask the panel and then didn't get around to it. In 4 to 5 weeks, insurance deemed our child medically stable. And so she was released from treatment. And anybody that knows anything about eating disorders, it's not a 5-week fix. But we didn't know that,
And no one told us.
and nobody
Yeah.
told us. And so
Who were you dealing? You didn't have like one doctor or one therapist that you was managing, helping you manage this? No.
not really. I mean, there were therapists.
She had a therapist, but it wasn't somebody that you could go to for
She had a
advice.
therapist at the residential treatment center and a psychiatrist.
Yeah.
And when we got her home, we tried to get her into a PHP. But then a couple days before Christmas,
A PHP is a
it's
Partial hospitalization.
yeah,
gotcha.
it's
Okay.
every day, 5 days a week. And but it was 2 days before Christmas, and that's when she made an attempt on her life.
Yeah.
And so then we were immediately thrown into the psych ward, and then from the psych ward back to another residential. And so you're just in this washing machine of trying to keep somebody alive and trying to get the therapy that you can afford, that is available, that is open. I mean, it's a difficult process. There's nothing fun or comfortable about it. And the reason we wrote the book is people don't tell you stuff between the therapist and the psychiatrist and, you know, all the different places. There was missing pieces of information, and it was so painful for us that we felt we had to create a little booklet so people could, you know what's coming, know that 5 weeks isn't going to solve your problem. It's much bigger than that, and you know, insurance isn't going to pay for it, and so
Was there something you could have done with insurance? Looking back, do you think that did you learn?
No, we tried, and so, you know, when you go to the psych ward, then it's re-triggered again, right? They don't necessarily want to pay for your child to heal. They want your child out of there as soon as possible, and that's a problem with our system.
Yeah.
Is insurance is dictating treatment,
Yeah.
and it shouldn't.
There's a lot of holes in the system, you know. I mean, I think before the crisis happens, you expect that, you know, there's going to be some friendly, engaged system to help you. And so many parents discover that they're on their own when there's really a crisis. So I'm sorry you had to go through that, but they're going to tell you before this is over how great she's doing now. Martin, what I especially want to ask you is that we've talked before today, there was mention during one of the panels about, I think a couple of the panels, about cultural stigma. And you definitely had to deal with that, right? Your son came home from college.
Yes, Alex, my 24-year-old son, you know, he was a very, you know, one of the things with, you know, Hispanic community is, you know, we bond to our children, you know, sometimes to the point that they say, you know what, give me space, you know, give me space. And one of the things that, you know, with Alex, he was a very bright child. He, you know, in elementary school, he got all the honor rolls. He was very active in high school, was in the basketball team. You know,
and when he came home from college, was it a surprise when he came home?
Oh yeah, definitely. You know, one of the things when he went to college, you know, a year into college, he wanted to come back home.
Yeah.
I said, you know what? Well, okay, I'm going to transfer back to a community college here locally. And I said, well, okay, son. So finally, you know, he sat us down, my wife and I, and he said, you know what? I need to see a therapist. And the first thing that came to my mind is like, you know, are you not feeling well? He goes, well, no, I need to see a therapist. You know, I'm going through something. And you know, in the Hispanic community, it's very shocking because, you know, what is this? So if we didn't know where to begin.
I've spoken to some Latinos who say that when this is a problem because they get faulted by other parents because the parents say, you're not doing a good enough job.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that's one of the things that, you know, the stigma is there that, you know what, he's just going through a phase, you know. It's not, you know, and mental illness in the Hispanic community is something that we don't hear about.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how did you, was that a problem? Did that end up being an obstacle for you in seeking treatment? Did you have to deal with that?
Definitely, you know, where do we begin? What door do we go and knock at, you know?
Yeah. And your son was the one who found the therapist, right?
Well, you know, he was very fortunate that through the community college, he was able to talk to his teachers about it. And he was, you could say he was referral to, by a referral by a teacher. He said, you know what, I got somebody that you could go talk to.
Yeah.
But yeah, you know, we were very fortunate that somebody guided him to the help that he needed.
Exactly. It's like there is support out there. There are programs that work. It's kind of like Tom Insel was saying. But you have to, but the distribution, the actual delivery of it is so messed up. But one point that I think is really important is there's a surprising amount of help that is available from schools. Like that you could get a 504, which is, you know, accommodations for your child. Depression, bipolar disorder, ADHD, all could qualify when they're in K through 12. And then afterwards, a lot of colleges are wising up to this problem. I think it's like 30% of kids in their first year of college come back home, are boomeranging these days. So that was definitely a surprise for me to hear about when my second son came back. But anyway, I think that there's also, okay, so there's an educational IEP, the Individual Educational Plan, which is more extensive than the 504. which if your child has something really serious going on, you can get all kinds of accommodations up to the level of you can get the child education at another school. So if that school, for so many kids who are like square pegs trying to fit into round holes of our school system, it's just not working at the school that they're going to. So you might have to take the extreme measure of finding another school. And if you're savvy about it, and sometimes unfortunately have to get a lawyer, schools really have to help you because it's federal law that there shouldn't be any barrier to getting an education. So knowing about these things is super important. So how did you conquer the affordability? How did you pay for this therapy?
Well, that's one of the things we brought up to our insurance, and we were very fortunate that they were able to cover some of the expense that was involved.
Just some.
Yeah.
Did you end up paying a lot of money?
Well,
for the-
it was a lot of mediation in between what was covered and what was not.
Did you found yourself arguing with the insurance companies, or?
We had a friend that sells insurance for a long time.
Yeah.
And we call him up
there you
and say,
go.
can you help us through this? And,
There you go.
we're
Yeah.
very fortunate that she helped us through trying to get some coverage for this.
So that's a great tip. Have a friend in the insurance industry, but also choose wisely. Like if there's any mental illness in your family, or if you have any concerns about your kids, when you're looking at insurance plans, there's a big difference in what they pay for. Ask about these questions because you might find yourself really with an enormous life-altering kind of bill, and that's a big problem too. I was recently working on a book about adolescent depression and talked to a doctor whose name I want to give her a shout out, Michelle Gouchereau, who is the founder of Well Coast Medicine in San Francisco. She structured her practice, unlike so many therapists, she's a psychiatrist and structured her practice so that they could take insurance. And she's very, very adamant about, people should be able to afford therapy. And so she's actually really built her career on it, which I admire so much. And I talked to her a lot about how can parents deal with these insurance companies, Sometimes it's just a matter of having somebody dedicated who is on the phone all day, which I'm sure you guys did, just haranguing them, calling, making demands, and it's nothing seems to be set in stone. I mean, sometimes they will give you that extra time in the residential treatment unit. One thing Michelle taught me about, which I do want to tell you about, is the issue of ghost networks. I don't know if anybody's I ended up writing a story about this. A lot of you may have already encountered this problem. When you're trying to find a therapist who's on your insurance, you might end up calling like 20, 30 people, and they're retired, they're actually not taking that insurance, they're dead, they work at a different place. It's amazing the amount of error in these lists of therapists, which are actually used by insurance companies to attract clients. That's a selling point, right? You think they have these great networks, and when you actually need them, they're not there. So I really looked into this because I think it's a fundamental issue in delivery of care. And what you can do there is if you ever find yourself in that situation, take super careful notes of everybody that you call. And if it's a crisis, call your insurance right away and tell them that it's a crisis, and they will find somebody for you, 9 times out of 10. Or they can make a single case exception. If you can't find somebody within a reasonable drive of your home, or somebody who treats the particular disorder or illness that your child is suffering, there is actually a lot more give. Some people think insurance companies are this monolith that's just, they say no and you have to accept it, but you actually don't have to accept it. So it's really good to educate yourself about this so that you can afford the care. So should we open it up to questions? Yeah, from...
I just wanted to add one
yeah.
thing. One of the treatment centers we were at, and this is something to ask a treatment center, they had a person who worked there just dealing with the insurance company, and I am pretty sure they got us extra months at Insight. So that's just a,
I kind of wish this had been brought up at maybe in future conferences, because the affordability of it can often be a real problem. And it's fantastic that with 6 sessions you were able to cope with your problem, but for many parents it takes a lot more.
Yeah, and I'll say that, part of that I think is because I have my training too,
Yes.
because she's young,
Yes.
and we caught it really early.
Yes.
But a month ago she was having fears again, and she said, "What's that? What's the person I went to and played in the sand? I think we need to go back to her." At 5, she was able to say that, and so this is 6 sessions for us worked for this time, but I'm confident we will be back.
Well, I sometimes think, and maybe it's just a way I console myself, is that if you do catch it, and you do, a child does get help at an early age, in their teens even, they will have a better understanding, because I think probably the majority of us have some kind of issue. So, but they'll have a better understanding of the way their brain works, and the realization that they can ask for help. So that's maybe a silver lining. Yes. Okay.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I would just say, on the note of insurance and why we chose to go private pay is because that's where we could get in faster.
Right.
Like I called Ohana, for
Right.
instance, and their wait list is so long, but
Right.
she was needing it now. Like she didn't want to go to school tomorrow. So I'm just not a waiting list kind of person.
Yeah.
And the person that we found was great and only was private pay. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's really a drag for the people who can't afford that,
Yeah.
right? I mean,
And-
I went ahead and paid for a ton of stuff out of pocket, but
yeah, you have
Yeah.
to. Yeah. So
Jane, I want to ask you just briefly before we open up to questions from the audience. I was lucky enough to take a training from you about youth mental health, and I don't think we've clearly enough explained what that is and how parents can benefit by taking this course.
Sure. So I'm a certified instructor for the Youth Mental Health First Aid Program, which I know Lori referenced in the last panel. And I was teaching one of those today, actually, from 10 to 3, so that's why I wasn't here until right before we started. But anyway, it's a 8-hour course. You do part of it self-paced, and then 5 hours in an in-person live virtual training, or now we're opening back up so we can start having them actually physically in person again. And it's much like physical health first aid, where you get certified. It's good for 3 years. You learn action steps on how to, when you observe changes in your child or their friends, in their appearance, their thoughts, their behaviors, there's 5 action steps on how you can intervene to get them access to the appropriate professional help, how you can create a support team and support network, and it just really builds capacity for adults to help youth, and that early intervention piece is huge.
Yeah, I think just knowing how to talk. One of the presenters earlier was talking about don't ask loaded questions. I love that, But anyway, before we do the questions, I do want to ask how your daughter is doing. And you have a great story about that.
Our daughter is a junior at UC Davis studying psychology. No surprise there.
Yay!
She's doing great. She's in the honors program and runs a bunch of animal rights groups, and she's got her sights set to grad school, so she's doing very well. Thank you.
Can you tell the story, though, about the person that she helped by telling her story?
Oh, yeah. So when our daughter was finishing up her treatment center, her last one, they were asked to go to a high school and speak, and so she agreed, which we were shocked because she has incredible social anxiety. And I'm like, "Are you sure you want to go?" And she said, "Yeah." I'm like, "Okay." The next year, the school requested her specifically to come back, and she did. And she came home, and we asked her how it went, and she said it was great. This young boy came up to me when I was done speaking and asked for a hug. And I said, "Okay, but why?" And he said, "Well, last year when you were here speaking, I was trying to figure out how I was going to kill myself. And I heard your story, and I got help instead." And so our daughter came home so happy that everything she had been through and that being vulnerable and telling her story made an impact on one life. She was over the moon. And then that led to this.
Oh,
Well, just briefly, I mean,
Yes,
because
yes.
of that,
Oh, right.
we knew how important these stories of recovery were, that they saved lives. We knew that at the treatment centers, alumni would come and talk to the kids who were in treatment. So we went online to find these, and we couldn't find them. There were no videos of teens telling their stories of recovery. So we asked our daughter if she thought that would be a good resource, and that's why we made Teens for Teens Help, where teens can hear other teens' story of recovery from a variety of mental health issues, and get the knowledge that they're not alone, that somebody else has gone through it, and that there's hope, help, inspiration, and resources. And so, we took all that problem and tried to make it, part of the solution.
That's amazing. That's really great. Martin, and your son, tell us about how he's doing now.
Well, Alex, one of the things that really maybe understood what he was going through, he said, if I didn't go through the therapy and counseling, I don't know where I will be at this time. And, and one of the things that it requires, as a parent, to be on that journey of recovery with them, driving him to the therapist, to the group chats, and you're part of his healing. And it really, you're living the same pain that he's going through, but you're also, walking with the recovery stage of him. One of the things, he was able to go back to school. He finished his major. He's now down south in San Diego, and he's working in the field that he majored in. And but we were very fortunate that he spoke out and said, "I need help."
That really speaks to a very close relationship, that he didn't feel shame, and he was able to tell you that, right?
Well, coming from a Hispanic family, that's something that I was very shocked and surprising, that he came out and say, "I need help." Because you don't see that very much in a Hispanic family. When a crisis comes, it seems like our children really isolate themselves and whatever problems they're going through.
What gave him that strength that he was able to do that, do you think?
I think that, we always have a good communication with them. It's like, what's going on? How's school? Mom is amazing. She calls them, every single one of them, every day. And she stays on the phone, and I said, for like 20 minutes, and I said, "You're not saying very much." "Well, at least I know I'm with them right now." I said, "Wow, it's amazing." That bonding is the thing that really opens up the conversation to let us know what's going on in their lives.
Thank you. So I don't want to give ourselves too many pats on the back, but I do want to say that not all stories work out this well, and that parents have to be there. They have to be on the spot. And we know that youth are more comfortable talking to other youth about their problems, et cetera, that they're more influenced by peers than parents, but they need their parents, and they need their parents to be noticing them and stepping in when necessary. So I know all of you will be doing that. But did you want to take the questions from the?
Yeah.
Okay.
Is there an extra microphone here? Because we can.
You can just hand it.
Okay.
Right. Oh.
Yeah. Okay. Here.
Okay.
Let's,
Here. Okay.
Okay.
I'll
All right. Great. So, does anyone have a question, a comment for the panel? Just come on up over here. I will make my way down. And here we go. Okay. Okay. Tell us your name.
Hi, I'm Molly from Ohana, and I'm the community-based mental health clinician providing prevention services in the middle schools. And my question for you, I have students signing up to be a part of my group to receive this service to learn how to help prevent these things from happening. And I always ask, like, who do you turn to? How likely are you to turn to your parents? And I do have a lot of Hispanic kiddos in my groups who are like, "Oh, no. We don't talk about mental health in my house. My dad shuts me down real quick. I don't feel like I can be heard." How do we help reach those families so we can help bridge that gap so our students can feel supported?
One of the things that I was very fortunate that my daughter, Alice, she was part of the Teen Aims many years back. And she brought it to my attention and said, "You know what? Hispanic communities are not really aware about mental health. So, you know, being that I work with the parish, with youth, it's something that, you know, we need to approach the parents and let them know that this is something that really is true. You know, mental health is part of something that teens go through. You know, it's very hard, especially in the Hispanic community, because you know what, their solution is get over it, move on. But it's very positive that, you know, the teen panel that was here, you know, really pushing to get something in their schools is going to really help out. I think we need a little bit more of a Hispanic awareness out there, you know, to really bring in to the awareness that there is help out there. And, you know, and you have to be persistent. You have to keep, you know, like the parents that are very, very hard that they don't want to accept that, you have to really pursue it.
Is there a role for the church in helping to get that message out?
Definitely. You know, one of the things in the youth ministry that I do is I do bring that awareness to them. I say, you know what, we sometimes see children that are going through very difficult times, and we have meetings with the parents. We say, you know what, we notice that your child is struggling with this, and sometimes they don't want to hear it. They don't want to hear it. You know, there's nothing wrong with my child. He's just going through one of those phases. But one of the things that's very important is, you know, you just have to continue pushing on it. You can't walk away from it, because, you know, like I said, how serious could it get? Definitely, you know. One of the things that it's very helpful is also, you know, if you see that she had, you know, if the parents don't want to open up, at least bring it to the awareness of their counselors in schools, or, you know, the staff at their school, you know. But it's a challenge. It's very challenging, because, you know, this is something new, especially for the Hispanic community. It's, you know, mental health is something that is very, I mean, the only reason I knew about it is because my son went through it. You know, and then, you know, I was very fortunate that, you know, if we do the training in Spanish, if we were able to do it for the Hispanic community, that will really help a lot in making that awareness for them.
Would you say that in the Hispanic community, they'd be more open to hearing about it from other people in the Hispanic community versus me? I'm white. I'm a therapist.
Can you say that one more time?
Sure. I was saying, would you feel like in the Hispanic community it would be more well received to learn about this from someone else who is Hispanic versus me, a white therapist? Or
I would think so, because, you know, by a Hispanic person speaking to them about mental health, they tend to listen. You know, coming from somebody else is like, oh, no, it can't be. You know, denial comes into the mind of the Hispanic community. It's very simple to try to, like you said, we also have a Spanish youth ministry that we try to reach out to the parents, and we have the Spanish-speaking staff speak to them. We have some concerns, and they listen. You know, it's in their language.
Yeah. We are working on getting the mental health first aid training in Spanish. Yeah, we're looking for Spanish instructors. And you had a question?
Yes.
Go ahead, stand up.
Thank you. Thank you. Very briefly, I just wanted to say thank you to each of you for being here and opening up about your stories. And parenting is, of course, a very personal journey. And I think I heard each of you mention your spouse, and you're sitting here together. And I believe parenting is a two-person job, and kudos to you for being in two-parent households. I've been a single parent for almost all of my daughter's life. She's 17. We have had a lot of issues come up very recently, but more importantly, I wanted to say thank you to Susan Stillwell and to AIM, and for this great organization, and how lucky I feel that we have AIM.
Thank you. I'm looking around for Susan. She's probably out preparing for the next thing. Yes, but we will. Yes.
Can I just share a little? So my personal story, I also grew up with a divorced family as a child, and so I, as a mother now, I do have a spouse, but I just know your daughter is so grateful for what you're doing and the sacrifices you're making, and I can say that even though it might not seem it now, my parent, it was life-saving what they did for me. So, yeah, even though they were divorced. So, yeah.
I just wanted to share one thing. One of the things, our daughter actually wrote the beginning, the prologue of our book, which is an open letter to parents who are going through this. And her message several times throughout that was never give up. And that she appreciates the fact that as much as she admits that she just absolutely hated us at the time, pushed us away, she knew deep down that we loved her and that she appreciated that we never gave up. So as much as they are pushing you away, don't give up.
Do we have any other questions? Open to questions and comments from the audience? Yes.
I'm just wondering, how about resources? You talked about the importance of taking care of your own stuff, so that you can show up for your kids. Any good ideas on resources?
Definitely.
I'm going to repeat the question so that we have it in the video and for the people that are watching virtually. The question about resources. She talks about taking care of your own stuff. So that, so take care of your own stuff. So what are some resources around that self-care part?
I'll just briefly talk about how I didn't. As a dad, we're supposed to fix stuff and, provide the resources that everybody needs and fix things. And I couldn't fix this. And I tried and tried and tried. And after 2 years, I was wiped out. There was hardly anything left of me. And so I finally got into a support group. And that support group really saved me. And, taught me that the best thing you can do as a parent is to model getting help, getting support, learning about the issue, and like he said, we went to all the family therapies and the group therapies and drove, I think, 50 or 60,000 miles 1 year to all the different treatment things she did. But that's what you do to get through it. And so I can't emphasize enough, find a support group for parents who are going through the same issue that you are going through with your child. There are support groups for everything. And I don't really know the resource to find it. I know that...
You don't even need a formal support group. I will just say that the women who got me through the most difficult years of my son were just women that I met who I saw had the same kind of issue. And those are bonds that will last for the rest of my life. It's like being in a war with them. So you don't even need to find a formal group. If you're part of the PTA, you could ask teachers if they could, maybe form, an informal group of parents. So, and other resources, again, it doesn't need to be anything institutional. Make sure that you find the time in your day to get out and move, all the things that you're telling your kid to do. To eat in a not crazy way, to get enough sleep, to know that you are in maybe a crisis mode and that you need to take care of yourself because otherwise you will burn out. Speaking of resources, though, I just do want to make a shout out to a friend of mine, Jean Blake, who recently made videos called Words Can Work. And they're all about, you'll hear a lot of teens talking about their own experiences with depression and anxiety. I mean, there's so much attention to this problem that I just feel like things are changing very quickly. But there's a lot of ways that we can all learn and up our understanding.
And then I'll just add a few things. I think in addition to the support groups that were mentioned, the informal and formal, learning about mindfulness practices and meditation. My Mental Health Connect, we actually do a 4-part class around mindfulness, and we teach families. And what I found is if we can, much like what one of the young women in the panel said, that training and education piece goes so far, and understanding that, mental health is a continuum and a spectrum, and how can we promote and build in healthy habits as a family. So if you were interested in bringing in the mindfulness just for your family unit, it's not therapy, it's not, get all deep into your dysfunction and fix your system, and all those things are super important too, but, I'd be happy to share more information about that. And then giving yourself that permission to unplug, so whatever that looks like for you, I think even if you feel like you just can't, you have to, like that. Unplugging is so huge. And then there's one group in Monterey that has been, that I just want to put a shout out to, that's called Breakthrough for Men. So there was a lot of talk earlier about just the need to help our young men and kind of get outside of the social conditioning that our young men go through. And this group is now virtual, so it's men from all over, and it's definitely, I would highly, highly recommend that for the men in your life who are wondering, what in the world can I do?
Any other questions? Questions, thoughts, comments? Yes. I have to get it on the microphone, though, because people who are virtual can't hear you.
Talking about the insurance and what gets reimbursed and not reimbursed, way back in the millennia, Y2K, when my eldest was born, I went through a heck of a time with insurance just for her birth. And I was reimbursed for 70% of it, and it was supposed to be at 90%. I was like, what do they do? And I'm not going to name the insurance company, but I hated them. And I said, is that what they do? They just cover at 70% and then they balance bill for the 30%? And people think, oh, that's my balance, I got to pay that. I fought tooth and nail for a year for that 20% to get it covered up to 90. And I thought, how many other people are going through this? I wanted to start a class action suit. I did go to law school. I am not a lawyer, but I do work in insurance. So anyway, thank you.
Great. Thank you. Yes. Running around. Yes.
So I understand that it's really difficult sometimes to transition from those inpatient services and treatment programs, and you go out in your community. And I have a friend of mine that had a son with mental illness since he was a child, and she has tore her hair out trying to figure out, where to get his care. And her biggest beef is that it's all so fragmented. And now that he's an adult with HIPAA rules and things, she can't get the information she needs, and he's really debilitated half the time. And so I'm not sure what my question is, but I was really I just wanted to give you guys kudos for navigating those systems, and I really think that there's a need to figure out a way to transition, that kind of intensive inpatient to all of a sudden you're out there in the community just floating around, not kind of knowing. And so I don't know if there's transitional systems that handle that kind of thing for you.
I'm not sure
The transition is very difficult, and that's where we had the biggest suicide attempt in the psych ward. It's very hard. They're in a facility, they're in with the group, they're in with a therapist and a psychiatrist there, and then they just got used to that, and they just are now open to do treatment, and then they're ripped out of there and stuck in a new place with new people. They're all strangers. It's incredibly hard for the kid going through it. And so, it's another trauma for them. And then you step down another time, and the system doesn't work. And that's part of what Tom and some of these other people were talking about. They know how to help people, but the system isn't helpful. And so it is difficult. And then as soon as they're over 18, you do lose control, and that makes it even more difficult. And so I don't have any solutions for you other than you just do what you can, and you hope and you pray and you work hard and you love, and you hope it works out, and hopefully it does.
I'll just say that it's so important if your child is getting ready to go to college and you know that there's some pre-existing anxiety or depression, to make sure to look at the resources of that college and factor that into your decision, because so many kids do come home, that first year just in total crisis, and maybe sending the child away far from home isn't a great idea in the first year. All these things you have to kind of take the long view and factor those things in.
I just have one quick important thing to add to that is when they do go away to college, there is a form that you can sign and that they can sign so that the health department at school, the nurse's office, the clinical office, can share information with you. And if you don't sign that, your child can be in crisis and the school will not call you and tell you. And so thank God we were given that tidbit of information when our daughter went away to school, so that we were able to communicate if there was any kind of a health issue whatsoever. So that was an important tip.
That depth of knowledge that you have, and it's not knowledge, it's wisdom. It's the learning the strategies to help your child and sharing it with others. And I hope that you all will continue, because there are so many parents out there, grandparents, all of us, who need to hear from you, and I know that all part of our own healing is sharing. Yes, go ahead, Jeff.
Just one more tip. If your child is at a point where they don't want to live, and that's a very scary thing, you try to connect them to things that they want to live for. And it can be as simple as, hey, this band that you like is playing a concert in June, and would you like to go? And then the other thing that we found incredibly important, besides the peer groups, because when she was in treatment with other peers, that was so powerful. And you saw the kids up here, and the peer-to-peer connection is so valuable. And then the third thing is a rescue pet. And there's evidence based on this with, veterans. Mm-hmm. And we got a rescue pet for our daughter, and I am sure it is a big part of her rescue.
Yeah.
And so if you can get a rescue pet, if your kid likes that, we recommend it.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you all so much. What a day. And so, yes, thank you. What a day and we will send PowerPoints, we will send links to resources, we will send as much as we can possibly send to all of you, and those of you who are still listening online. But I think it's so appropriate if we have a youth. Willow, will you please join us? And we're going to end in a poem. And then after the poem, we'll go out to the reception, and there's a reception out there with the works of art, the expressions of all of what we talked about is depicted by our youth out in the lobby, and we can join together and kind of and hug and well, we can do what we can. Yeah. Okay, Willow, thank you so much.
This is my wish for you. Comfort on difficult days, smiles when sadness intrudes, rainbows to follow the clouds, laughter to kiss your lips, sunsets to warm your heart, hugs when your spirits sag, beauty for your eyes to see, friendships to brighten your being, faith so that you can believe, confidence for when you doubt, courage to know yourself, patience to accept the truth, love to complete your life. Ralph Waldo Emerson. Thank you.